microphone test, performance assets and strategy scrutiny committee, starting at 5:30.
Good evening, everybody, here in the chamber and watching online, and welcome to this evening's Performance, Assets and Strategy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday the 9th of September at 5:30 at the Guildhall for Cambridge City Council. I'd particularly like to welcome Councillor Dinah Pounds, who has joined as our new member, and to put on record my thanks to Councillor Dave Bajan, previous member who's no longer on this committee, for his contributions at the previous meetings and during briefing sessions with members. As we are aware, it is likely that some of the civic quarter discussion may need to be held in exempt session this evening, as the papers contain commercially sensitive information. I'm therefore using my powers as chair to reorder the agenda, so we will take the work plan just before civic quarter, purely so members of the public don't have to sit waiting with a blank screen until we come back. So I hope that's acceptable to everybody. Obviously, we've got a lot of people with us tonight, so I will, in a moment, ask members to introduce themselves who are sitting on this committee. And I really want to have as full a debate as possible in an open session for as long as possible. I'm happy to allow non-committee members to speak, if time allows, but we'll obviously prioritise scrutiny members first, and then the relevant cabinet members who've joined us this evening for their items. Could I just go round the room and ask members to just introduce themselves, please? Bear in mind this is a non-whipped committee, so we're not necessarily talking about our party affiliations. Could I? Oh, well, I'm Councillor Katie Porrer. I'm chairing this meeting, and my vice chair.
Jenny Gawthorpe-Wood, so I'm a councillor for King's Hedges and vice chair.
Hello, I'm Councillor Dinah Pounds, councillor for Romsey.
Patrick Shield, Arbury.
Jamie DL, West Chesterton.
Tim Griffin, Coleridge.
Mike Davey, Petersfield.
Hugh Clough, Newnham.
So those are the members of the committee, and can I ask the cabinet member who's here to speak to introduce himself, and followed by the officers. Thank you.
I'm Simon Smith. I'm a councillor for Castlewood, and I'm the cabinet member for Finance and Resources.
Oh, apologies, Jodie doesn't seem to have a working microphone. We'll just
Hi, I'm Jodie Everington, the Council's Chief Finance Officer and Section 151 Officer.
I'm Ben Binns, Assistant Director of Development.
Thank you very much. I'm also joined by Matt Stickley from Democratic Services, who's our scrutiny officer, and Sarah, who's very kindly doing all the technical things, Sarah Michael, our committee manager. We also have in the room, just for the information of the public, Councillor Martin Smart, who's cabinet member for Open Spaces and City Services, if I've got that broadly right. We have Councillor Cameron Holloway, who's the leader of the council. We have Councillor Tim Bick, who's a ward councillor for Market Ward, and we have Councillor Karen Young, who is a Queen Edith's councillor, but also chairs the other scrutiny committee. And who have I missed? Oh, and we have some members of the public as well. And I think, is that, yeah, I think that's, yeah, we have members of the public as well, sitting at the back. Who have I, Karen is indicating I've missed someone. I know Patrick's a member of the committee. He's fine. Can I ask if anyone, I haven't received any apologies. I think we're all here, so I'm assuming that's good to go. And can I ask if members have any declarations of interest? No, obviously I remind you, you can make a declaration of interest at any point during the meeting should you find something that you realise later is necessary to declare. We have had no public questions submitted to this meeting. There have been, I know, perhaps some emails from market traders to members. Obviously, it's up to members. That didn't come in as a public question, but members can obviously raise anything they want, bearing in mind some may need to be in closed session if it's relating to some financial issues. So we move to the first item on the agenda, which is the update on budget setting consultation. These papers, as you will see, are the ones that went to Cabinet, but we had asked them to come here at our last meeting because we wanted to have scrutinise around the consultation. That's kind of the new thing coming forward before we fully scrutinise the budget in our January meeting. So I'm going to ask Councillor Simon Smith to do a very brief introduction if you want to, and then I'm going to hand over to Jodie Etherington, who's our CFO, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Just a few words, Chair, thank you. The Civic Quarter scheme is of strategic scale and significance to the future use and viability of 3 heritage assets.
Oh no, this is just the budget bit first. We've got... Yeah, Simon, Councillor Smith is doing all of these, I think. If you're happy for Jodie to go straight ahead with the budget, we're just looking at the papers you already had at Cabinet.
Yes, that's right. Sorry. That was very confusing for everybody. What I'd like to say, Chair, just as an introduction on this, is that last year we made a considerable number of savings and increases in income through fee increases and so on, with the view to balancing the general fund budget over a 5-year period, which is a statutory duty on the council. And of course, for this financial year, it was incredibly important that those savings and this great income growth were actually delivered. And the positive news is that the Q1 management information is basically forecasting that we will be able to make those services and put the council's general fund into a very healthy position going forward, not continuing to run a larger deficit. So that's the headline, that's the key message. We're on track, but of course we have to keep monitoring, paying attention to it to make sure it works. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will hand over to Jodie now.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you said, this is the same budget setting context paper that was received by Cabinet in July, so where we've got a very packed agenda this evening, so I'll keep my comments brief and focus on the consultation elements, but clearly I'm happy to answer questions on the rest of the report if members of the committee have them. So essentially we are looking this year to take a slightly different approach to the budget consultation to the one that we took last year. Last year we consulted quite late in the budget setting process, and therefore we were asking questions about very specific budget proposals which had come forward that have been developed by both by officers and by members throughout the process. This year we're going out to consultation slightly earlier, so we're looking to launch the budget setting consultation hopefully at some point in the next 2 weeks. It will be a 6-week consultation, so it will take us roughly through till the end of October, possibly early November, and it's going to have a more strategic focus, so it's going to be asking questions about the council's vision, about which elements of the vision the public feel we should be prioritising in terms of where we direct our resources, and again in terms of sort of council services, looking at where the public feels we should be prioritising our resources, because that's ultimately the question when setting the budget is, you know, should we spend more money in area A and less in area B, etc. So by going out to consultation earlier and asking those more strategic high-level questions, we are hopefully giving the public an opportunity to make a more meaningful input at an earlier stage in the process that we can then take with us through October and November, and as we go through and develop those more detailed budget proposals, which will then come back to scrutiny in January, so same timetable as usual. So I think the budget will come back to this scrutiny committee on January the 27th before going forward to Cabinet on February the 10th, who will then recommend the final budget to Council in the final week of February.
Thank you very much, Jodie. Yeah, so just to reiterate, these are the papers that have already been to Cabinet, but do members have any questions? Councillor Davey?
Just got one, that the paper that's come before us, whilst very helpful, it's not actually about the consultation process. And it's about if it's going to go out to public in a fortnight, was there no way the draft could have come to us to look at tonight?
I think we are still drafting the consultation at the moment. I'm working closely with the communications team on that. But also, I think it's important that when the consultation goes out, that what we're putting out there is the correct questions, and that we're asking the correct questions in the right way. And I think putting different iterations of a public consultation into the public domain before we're ready to launch it isn't necessarily helpful.
I would agree, but it could have been done in private. I think the point is, it's a document that's going out to the public, which won't have been scrutinised now. I won't labour the point, but again, if you'd wanted comments, it could have come here in private, just as the papers later on will be going in private. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. And obviously it is up to the Scrutiny Committee to request things like that. You could do if you wanted to say you want to see it before it goes out, but that's within our gift, I believe. Obviously subject to what the Cabinet member thinks. I think Councillor Clough was next.
Yes, just two hopefully very quick questions. So under 4.1, the changes to the proposed updated savings target, that does that include anything for the civic quarter? And the second question is 4.3, where they're talking about there used to be a 4% top slicing from staff costs. What was that sum before, and what is it likely that's going to go into the contingency in general terms? Thank you.
Thank you. So, first question, in terms of the how the civic quarter is taken into account, as you will see from the paper later on when we come to talk about the civic quarter, we're very much treating that as a self-contained project. So the sources of financing that are being assumed to fund the civic quarter project, it's been designed in a way that it won't impact on the council's ongoing revenue budget. So that's very much kind of treated separately, and we will put separate funds aside to make sure that that's fully financed. So that won't have any impact on the savings targets, whether or not that project were to go ahead. In terms of the turnover contingency, the figures are actually in the table at 4.1, so it's around about £750,000 per year that we will be essentially putting aside as a central contingency to pay for any issues related to staff turnover or staff absence. It is on the table. It's about the 5th row down, creation of turnover contingency.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Gawthrope would, and then we've got Councillor Dale.
Okay, well, I got some sort of more minor questions, and following on from what Councillor Davey has said, I mean, at the moment, in the past, we've done a low level, if you use a very specific consultation, we've done very high level ones. And what this doesn't tell me is what the feedback was in previous years. I mean, maybe we should take it outside this, but I do worry that some people won't be able to sort of engage properly with a high level strategic consultation, and you may get some very strange suggestions. That's what, well, I mean, there's always the possibility, sorry, public. So I'm wondering if there's a halfway house where you have strategic questions with examples of the sort of thing that you're asking for. And then I just did ask about the headline savings target. Is this higher? So this is 4.1, 1.5 million. This is why I can't read my own writing. Is this higher or lower than expected? And then I put something about 4.2 Appendix A. So that's that 1.5 new headline savings target of 1.5 million a year. And then, yes, when you talk about this is 4.4 and the fundings assumptions and the business rates, that the historic accumulated growth will be lost next year. That is obviously going forward. It's not looking backwards. I just wanted you to confirm that, which I think is right, because the way it read, it didn't seem as clear as it actually is. And then the other thing, yeah, it's about the grants. So this is for really the housing revenue account. And whether the grants are likely to be higher or better than hoped for. I mean, I know we're moving away from reliance on business rates that went into the reserves, apart from a small amount that wasn't put into reserves, I'm right in thinking, and more certainty about having what I assume you mentioned grants. This is the general fund, which I assume is the local government finance grant, yeah. But I do worry when it comes to housing as well, how can we be sure that we'll get the grants that we need? Different from the general fund, quite recognise that. And obviously, you know, with fast-growing population, we get more, but we may actually get less than we had in the past. And I worry about that. So a few more comments about that, Pat, please.
Thank you. So yes, I mean, in terms of the consultation, maybe I should just sort of clarify a little bit what I mean when I say sort of a more strategic consultation. And I am more than happy to share the draft consultation with committee members prior to publication, if that will be helpful. But the sort of example questions that we're looking at asking is, for example, looking at council services, we might say something like, you know, from your council tax, from the average Band D council tax, the council spends X pounds a year on community centres. Do you feel you get value for money from that service? Do you feel this is an important area for the council to spend money on? So we're asking those sort of questions. So while they are not necessarily focusing on a specific proposal, they are still fairly granular in nature, and hopefully questions that are accessible to a large number of respondents. And we really do want to encourage responses to the consultation from as many different people as possible, and to make it as accessible as possible to do that. So that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about when I'm talking about a more kind of strategic consultation. There will obviously still be opportunities for people to provide free text responses and for people to provide their own suggestions, as we would always have with these things. In terms of the savings targets and where we are with that, so you may remember last year we set ourselves a target of 6 million over 2 years, and we achieved 4.9 in year one, which I think was really good. So this year we're looking at 1.5 over 2 years. The budget gap has come down from where we were at the budget setting stage last year, partly as a result of the good work that's been done already in delivering those savings. I think it's fair to say as well that the government consultation on fair funding review at the moment is showing us in a slightly better position than maybe we were forecasting, and there has been a swing very much away from reliance on future business rate growth towards the core government grant. The main thing that's driving that is our population increase. So government are focusing very much, they look at a number of different metrics when deciding what the resource needs of each council are. They look at things like deprivation, they look at things like overall population, but overall population is the biggest factor. They've also incorporated daytime population, which actually brings a really good, that's really beneficial to us because of the number of people we have coming into the city, both commuters and visitors and tourists. That all helps. So the fact that's taken into account means our kind of core funding grants are actually going up. Now, at the same time, we are losing the accumulated business rates growth, which you'll be aware is a real benefit to us at the moment. So whilst we are still worse off overall, we are less worse off than we were expecting, if that makes sense. So that's helped a little bit in terms of the budget gap and setting that savings target. I will caveat this, obviously it's only a consultation, government haven't made any final announcements yet, and we are expecting that usually around about Christmas Eve they actually come out with the provisional finance settlement. It's always a nice little Christmas present. So we'll wait and see, but at the moment these are the assumptions that we're working on. So that's the general fund side. I guess in terms of the HRA, we're not reliant on grant in the HRA in the same way. So whereas on the general fund, we very much rely on that core spending power and the core government grant to fund services. Within the HRA, the ongoing revenue, day-to-day revenue costs are funded from our rental income. So essentially it's a ring-fenced account, and the rental income that the tenants pay for the HRA services. Where we are reliant upon grant income on the HRA is more in the development programme and the reliance on Homes England grant to ensure that we can deliver the new homes that we're looking to build over the next 5 to 6 years. And I don't know whether Ben's got anything to add on that, but so it's a slightly different it's a slightly different reliance there. We are still waiting for further clarity from Homes England as to what their future grant offering may look like, and hopefully again we'll have more certainty when we come back in January.
Thank you very much, Jodie. And Councillor Dale, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm probably sort of linking to points that other councillors have made around the consultation, but we're talking about the sort of high level. I guess it's probably frustrating we can't see then where the questions are, because there's a danger that people struggle to engage with that. I think when we also then look at still quite substantial savings targets, that indicates there will be cuts to be made, some tough decisions, and appreciating that, you know, government finance is hard at the moment, you know, all of that caveated, I think it can be quite important that different stakeholder groups other than the political parties have a chance to really input when we actually get to that point, when there are decisions that might really cause concern for people and they may think of being underrepresented. When do we think we would start to see the sort of the tough decisions, and how will we engage with the local community and actually, you know, for them to be able to then have a further say in that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think first of all, we need to recognise that there were some tough decisions made last year, and that contributed towards the 4.9 million of savings that have already been delivered. And we did see separate consultations then on specific, where there were specific service impacts, you know, and especially where there were specific equalities impacts, and we would continue to do that. So whilst we're doing a higher level overall budget consultation, if a budget proposal was to come through that was going to have a significant impact on service users or a significant equalities impact, we would still go out and carry out a separate consultation on that proposal, like we did, for example, last year with the public toilets. And that's another reason for doing the budget consultation slightly earlier and making it slightly more high level, so that we don't get, because what we had last year were consultations running concurrently that were asking very similar but slightly different questions. And I don't think that was necessarily helpful. So the idea is we do the budget consultation with the overall strategic questions now. If there are proposals coming through that impact on services, we would consult on those separately. That said, I think we recognise that we went through quite a significant savings round last year. We're still, a lot of those changes are still bedding in. The savings targets are much lower this year, so I'm not expecting anything like that sort of level of saving or that level of impact this year. We are looking at areas, we're already looking at areas where we can make efficiency savings without impact on council services, and we've already identified some of those. We're looking at areas where we may already be outperforming the budget this year, and looking if there's opportunities to make budget savings without actually impacting what we're actually spending, and we've identified some of those already. So I think there are less painful options that are coming forward that we're already looking at in order to be able to get to that 2-year target.
Thank you very much. I think there's Councillor Pound. I haven't got anyone else's hand up. Not that I don't want to stop debate, but I'm aware we've got a very big agenda. So hopefully after Councillor Pounds, we'll move to a summary, if that's okay. Thank you. Councillor Pounds, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to say, I would like to support what Councillor Davies said, and we very much would like to see the questions in enough time to be able to perhaps have some input as well. I know that there's been a report recently about personal satisfaction in Cambridge. It wasn't very good, but it was also based on 21 to 23 statistics. So hopefully it's not the same now, but I think it's really important that we target and make sure the questions cover what people obviously are finding dissatisfying about living in Cambridge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does Councillor Smith, do you have anything to add? I hope it's up to you. I'm very happy if you don't, because we've got a big agenda, but if you wish to, please do.
Yes, it's just a further couple of comments on the consultation. We've been basically experimenting with the consultation process on the budget, and last year there was pressure to increase the number of responses, and the Commons team got their heads around that, and we got a substantial increase in responses, which was quite helpful. But we didn't really get a stratified response in the sense that it was representative of the communities that we serve. So the challenge that's been given to the Commons team this time round is to design a consultation that will better reflect the people we represent, and rather than just having absolutely everything online, for example, go to groups who are meeting in community centres and so on, and give sort of shorter surveys so it can be done more quickly and we get more respondents and so on and so forth. So it's work in progress. It is delayed. I would have much preferred to have brought this to this meeting, but unfortunately not been able to do that. And we will circulate this to members of the Scrutiny Committee for their comments. We welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, obviously, members of Cabinet here, but just to summarise, I think there was a concern we haven't seen the questions, but I think Councillor Smith and Jodie have said that they will be willing to share those with scrutiny members, which I'm assuming everyone is in favour of. I've not seen any dissent on that. We had some mentions of, are we making use of last year's data as well? And the fact that obviously we're consulting slightly earlier this year rather than later, but does that leave any protected groups or issues vulnerable? So I think that's things that I hope you'll be able to bear in mind. And also, if you are sharing the questions, if you have a plan for engagement, as Councillor Smith mentioned, it would be, I'm imagining, helpful to share that with scrutiny members as well. So I'm happy to, if you could send that to myself and the Vice Chair, we will ensure that goes round to members. Thank you very much. I've just been reminded by Matt, who's keeping me on the straight and narrow, that I forgot to ask if everyone's happy with the minutes. So my apologies, I jumped on with eagerness to the budget. I'm happy with the minutes. Is everybody else? I see no dissent. Okay, so just to note that we are approving the minutes of the last meeting. Thank you very much. So I will, well, I think Councillor Smith and Jodie have heard our comments, and we'll look forward to having the paperwork come forward shortly. We're now moving on to item 5A, which is a report we requested at last scrutiny on procurement. We have a second part of that on procurement pipeline, which is slightly separate, but both are being presented by Jane White-Mantell, the officer who's online. Jane's going to do a short presentation. I am very mindful, as I said in emails, that we have there's a couple of very big items, particularly the civic quarter. So I'm hoping that we can obviously scrutinise this well, but make sure we leave enough time later. So I'm going to hand over to Jane, if that's okay. Oh, there you are online. Hello. If you wouldn't mind running through the presentation. So this was in response to our request for Jane to talk about the new procurement regulations that came in nationally in February and how that has affected the council's approach, and particularly looking at, are there any conflicts between some of our social value aspirations versus best value in terms of financial outcomes. Thank you, Jane.
I'm hoping that you can see the procurement at Cambridge City Council.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so to introduce myself, my name is Jane White-Mantell. I am the Chief Procurement Officer and I look after all of the procurement needs, excluding property and HR, so personal HR contracts. They are excluded from the Procurement Act. So I'm going to just quickly go through, and it is going to be a whistle-stop tour because it is a huge topic, one very close to my heart, and I am very passionate about procurement and doing it right, frankly. So some basic facts, first of all. The Tussell Trust are an independent organisation who look at all of the open data and come up with a set of figures and basic understanding of how councils are doing in an overall aspect. So the £125.3 million we spent last year was influenceable spend. So it doesn't account for all of our spend, it accounts for the procurement side of our spend. So those things that we have influence over. And to give it a little bit more context, there are 317 councils in England, Wales and Scotland, 22 in Wales and 32 in Scotland. Of those councils, the figures that we're looking at now are from 311 councils. And to just give it a slightly more wider context, UK-wide, we are the 160th person or council in spend terms, and we are the 151st in population terms. However, looking at nationwide, we are 14th with engagement with SMEs and 61st with using our local services. If we look at that regionally, which I think are the numbers you've got up there, so it's the east of England, which is 50 councils. We are 3rd with SMEs, 8th with local spend, and 34th with VCSEs. So the voluntary sector, where we come quite poorly represented at 284th nationwide, is because we do a lot more grant work than some of these other councils, and that isn't taken into account. It would also say that these figures include both revenue and capital and combine the general fund and the housing revenue account as well, because some of the contracts cut across both of those. I would also say that including the procurement legislation, which is massive these days, we also have to take account of the social value legislation of 2012, the Landlord and Tenant Act of 1985, particularly Section 20, as well as approximately 25 UK treaties that we have outside of the UK. So I'm going to do a little history now. So where procurement came from, that was always there as far as I can see, but when it became more important in the EU terms. So the procurement regulations were first introduced 1971 as construction only regulations. And that was to ensure that there was equal and fair treatment of all of the contractors across Europe. They then brought in goods and services in 1976, and there have been several iterations of the Act and the changes to the actual legislation, updating it as we've gone along. When I first started in procurement, we weren't talking about euros and pounds, we were talking about ECUs, so European currency units. So I've been around a while, not quite since the beginning, though, I would point out. Most recently, we had the PCR 2015, which were the regulations that we had prior to Brexit, and then they were changed very slightly when we Brexited, with the idea that we would then do a huge review, which the government undertook, and the new Procurement Act was developed. So in October 23, the King signed the Procurement Act into legislation, and then in May 84, the procurement regulations went into legislation. We need both sets in order to ensure that we are using the Procurement Act in the correct way. So it's basically the guidance mechanism. So before the PCR 2015, any changes that were made were minor and incidental and quickly absorbed and understood. This is, with the new Procurement Act 2023, this is a complete and utter change in procurement and how we work. So although the principles have stayed the same, as in we are still required to be open, fair, transparent and provide value for money, and the thresholds haven't changed because why would they? They match with the treaty requirements. And there is still a requirement to advertise contracts. However, previously, in order to complete a procurement, we would have to put 3 notices in the public domain for over threshold contracts, and I'll cover thresholds later on in the presentation. Now we have to put a minimum of 7 out, and sometimes as many as 12, depending on what we're doing. So the changes are the requirement to publish a pipeline, which is the next report that's coming. The additional mandatory notices that we've just mentioned that have to go out. There are, previously, in the old Act, procurement ended at the point of contract signature. So once a contract was signed, we would walk away and we would start our next procurement. With this legislation, we have a level of responsibility to ensure that contract management happens. And that's for contracts in excess of 4.4 million, which we have to report to the Cabinet Office. Although I haven't quite got that mechanism in place yet, but it is coming. And we were very clearly told that there were no more evergreen contracts. An evergreen contract is where you've let a contract a number of years ago, and when it comes to the end of its term, you just roll it over for a further year. We can't do that anymore. That's particularly relevant in IT contracts. So basically, we've got a lot more administration and a lot more oversight, and we are building on that as we go along. I would point out that we have contracts running currently that were still under the EU terms, so we still have to be mindful of EU law in some instances. Also, under the Procurement Regulations Act 2015, we've still got quite a few of those. And now we're starting to get contracts that we're letting under the Procurement Act. So, a little bit about the procurement team. We are not many, but we work very, very hard. Like everyone else in the council, of course, but with the responsibility of contract management, we've had to add an additional resource to the team. So last year, for example, we let approximately 200 contracts, varying in value from £25,000 through to multiple millions. We have oversight of those contracts. We're there to help anyone and everyone who is requiring our help. We are still waiting for some of the requirements of the new Act to come into force, and we're waiting for instruction from the Cabinet Office. So we're still building on what we know. We've started to put in place some of the updates to our standard forms, and we are building a contracts register and a contract management register that will be published on our intranet and on our internet, so that people can see clearly who manages the contracts and when they're due for renewal, etc., etc. The government, not content with putting us through the ringer and bringing this legislation in in February, have gone out to consultation for further changes to the procurement law. So we're all very excited about that. And we have also, as part of the work moving forward, introduced the contracts module onto Tech One, so that we'll get greater oversight of how we're spending our money as we're spending it. So that's all brilliant news, I think. So we've talked briefly about thresholds. These are our current thresholds. Excuse me. So up to 5k, we let people do whatever they would like to do within reason. We do give them some pointers and suggest they might want to talk to more than one person. I should also point out that these values are for the entire lifetime of a contract, and in government terms that means a contract is 4 years long. So if you're going to spend more than 5k over those 4 years with a particular supplier, then you need to think about a different route. So from 5k to 25k, and 25k is the point at which the government say we must advertise opportunity. We ask people to get a minimum of 3 quotes, and we will start checking that 3 quotes have been sought. We may not get responses, but we do ask them to seek 3 quotes at least. Now, we have a big split now between goods and services and construction. So from 25k to £179,800, which is the threshold currently, we have to make sure that we're running an internal tender that meets the requirements. And depending on the complexity, we'll either use an RFQ, which is a kind of slimmed down tender, or we'll use a full tender pack. With construction, it goes from 25k to 4.4 million. All of these figures, by the way, are quoted excluding VAT. We don't take account of VAT in procurement. It's just the cost to us. So again, they must be advertised. We ask them to be advertised for at least a sensible period, because the longer you advertise something, the better the response you get in general terms. And then over 179k or 4.4 million, it has to be a full FTS tender, which is Find a Tender Service, which is the government website where we have to publish all of our tenders. And that's on the central digital platform run by the Cabinet Office. So there's different types of procurement. As I've mentioned, there's an RFQ, there's a tender, there's the full tender that we do, that's the government requirement. There's also access we have to frameworks, which are pre-let contracts let by other people. They have their place, they have their limitations as well. And there's also a dynamic market, which used to be called a dynamic purchasing market, but now it's called a dynamic market. So talking about contract management, this is a new area for procurement to be responsible for, basically. And as a support to that, the government have set up, or the Cabinet Office have set up the PRU, the Procurement Review Unit, which has 3 major tasks. It supports us in improving standards and compliance. We can go to them for help and ask them questions if we're stuck. It also is to review requests that suppliers have made by they're considering we've made an unfair judgment or done something unfair in a procurement. So we can be investigated by the PRU, and they have sweeping powers to come in and look at what we're doing. And then the third part of it is they run a debarment service. So if we have issues with a supplier, genuine issues that we can demonstrate, we can have them barred from being able to access government contracts for a period of time. So we have lots of requirements coming onto us, but we also have the ability to start looking at how we're making our suppliers more compliant and making them manage their contracts with us better. Oh, sorry. Oh, I've gone backwards. Apologies. I don't know what's happened here. Okay, so preparing for the change has been quite an interesting challenge for us. So one of the first things we did in procurement was we ran a session of lunch and learns about contract management, because it's one of the areas that, not just in this council, but in most councils that I've worked in, there is a distinct lack of knowledge and understanding. So we ran a few sessions of lunch and learns. In the meantime, we found that the government commercial college was running some free training. Now, the free training, although very good, is central government based. But having said that, the fundamentals remain the same. So we encourage people to go on to that course and to do some learning. And 42 staff have actually undertaken and completed the foundation and been awarded a certificate on the basic level. We've got 6 now taking the Foundation Plus. And in conjunction with HR and training and development, learning and development, we found a source who were prepared to fund for us the practitioner level training. That's £5,500 to do the course, and we've actually managed to undertake. We've got 7 practitioners now in the council. That's cost us nothing. So we are looking for further training on that, but funding doesn't seem to be available right now. It talked about the procurement team. We've got some additional support in terms of the contract management side of things, and we've got somebody who's specifically looking at our contracts. So looking at our spend data for spent money, so money we can't influence because we've already spent it, we found that we had 17 suppliers of uniform, which was weird, and 8 suppliers of washroom consumables. So we're starting to work on putting together a set of corporate contracts that are only 1 or 2 suppliers, that will make the finance aspects easier, but that we can then properly manage, as well as making sure that we're updating documents and putting in some guidance where we can. So just to add to that, and just to say that the government are still issuing what they call procurement policy notices, PPNs, and currently there are 64 that we need to be mindful of. We've still got some aspects of the Procurement Act that haven't been put into force. We're waiting for the Cabinet Office to come back to us on those. So we're waiting in eager anticipation. So there's still lots to do, basically. And that, I think, is my lot.
Thank you.
Hopefully that's been helpful.
Thank you, that's really useful. Now, obviously, that's quite a high-level report.
It is.
The next item is almost directly related to this in the sense that we're actually looking at our first pipeline proposal. If members
Yes.
have burning questions for Jane now, they're welcome to ask them about the principles, or if you prefer, we could roll them into the next item, which hopefully you've all read the papers for, and then sort of combine them with questions. So, for example, if you want to ask, what does the KPI mean, you could relate it to the next. Are members happy to do that? Or Councillor Pound, I think, would like to speak. Oh, no, okay, no, that's fine. I just thought I'd ask. Okay, so we'll go with some general questions, Jane. Oh, yes, sorry, Jane.
Can I just say that I'm not presenting it, but Sean Cleary is presenting it because
Yes.
he is a part of the area that we focused on first.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, we'll take some questions now. Councillor Pounds, and I think Councillor Davey, Councillor Clough. Councillor Pounds.
Thank you very much. That was a really, really interesting presentation. Thank you. And I think it's really welcome. It's going to encourage good practice. I would just say that you've done some preparing for the change with staff. Is there something that we could have for councillors, even if it's just some information, written information? Because obviously, you know, talking to residents, it's useful to know the procedures and things for procurement. Thank you.
I don't have anything currently prepared, but as I'm developing the staff versions, I will ensure that I do a councillor version as well. So I could do an overview, a quick overview, and it would be that. But as we develop them, I can give you updates if that's helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, a quick overview would be helpful, just for not just for this committee, but for all councillors. I think it would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey?
Yeah, Jane, thank you very much for this. This is a really welcome presentation about hidden and much undervalued part of our council, particularly if you look at the volume of money that actually has to be used. My question is, in addition to all the government requirements, we introduced a policy on community wealth building 2 years ago, and I'm intrigued as to how that has filtered into your work. I did see reference to that in Sean's metrics, which we'll come on to later, but as a general principle, has that proved tricky? Although, again, I note that roughly 50% of all our contracts, which is a significant amount, go to local businesses. But I just wondered, in addition, as I say, in addition to government requirements, how have you managed to integrate the council's wishes around community wealth building? Thank you.
So we do have elements of social value in all of our contracts. Part of the issue we had before this new legislation, in fact, was we would have social value requirements in our contracts, but because we had less than robust contract management processes, we weren't actually making sure that we got the value from those pledges that were made during the contracting period. So the new contract management that we've got, and the fact that, I mean, I do think they've given it to procurement because we're a bit like, have you done that yet? Have you done that yet? Has this happened? Have you done that yet? Have you done that yet? And I think that's why we got the contract management piece. So we're just grateful for that. But Jane, it will ensure...
Jane, that's not really what I asked, Jane. I asked about, I realise you've had government requirements. My question was about council policy requirements. And has that proved politically difficult professionally? Or have you been able to integrate that okay?
Yes and no. I mean, some of our contracts are by definition social value anyway. We have made some steps forward with the social value elements and the Match My Project, and we are actively engaging with people to do that. But we are also putting that into our tender documents so that people are being made aware that even if there isn't necessarily a social value element, we'd still want them to sign up to the Match My Project piece of work and ensure that they are engaging properly with returning to the organisation what it is we need. One of the things that we have been more mindful of, I think, is that making sure that the social value that we're getting back from our contracts is local, as opposed to if we're engaging with someone, say, from Newcastle, they are supporting apprenticeships in Newcastle. We are saying, no, we want to make sure that at least the percentage of what you're doing is coming back into Cambridge. So I would suggest that we are making headway with it. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but we are absolutely committed to doing it.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was very much the concern the committee raised last time, Jane, was this, is there a conflict between us saying, for example, we want to define value as not just monetary value, it might be social value, it might be apprenticeship. So it's good to hear that that is coming forward, but I'm sure we'll probably want to keep an eye on it. Councillor Clough?
Yeah, hopefully fairly quick ones. What you mentioned Tech One, I didn't understand what that was.
That's the finance system.
Okay, great.
Technology one. So the contracts module is part of the finance system, so it's all linked up together.
Oh, thank you for that. You mentioned the period. Was that so? The period is for 5 years. So it's the spend over 5 years. Did you say 5 years? So for instance, if you're spending 5k over, it's got to be over 5 years.
Yes.
You take a look.
So the government say that a contract, if we don't have the term of a contract, we don't know specifically the term of the contract, because in a lot of times we know the term of the contract and it's greater than 4 years and we declare the amount that is going to be, etc., etc. But if we don't know the term of it, then they assume the term is 4 years.
Okay. And finally, very quickly, you said the framework agreements weren't important any longer. I assume that was a sort of a tool that people would use now, but is that not the case?
No, I mean, frameworks are still important. We haven't got many frameworks that are let via the new Act. So most of the frameworks that we're using are from the old PCR regulations. So we're still managing them under the old Act. We're likely to be in that position until, I think the government said they're stopping current frameworks in 2028. So all of the frameworks moving forward will be under the new Act, and that will make it easier. But we will still have contracts under PCR long past 2028 because we've got some quite long-term contracts.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. So just to note, I think in terms of actions from that, I do agree with Councillor Pounds that some kind of training or just a briefing session for all councils would be useful, because this is a change and it's something it's useful to report to residents too, particularly if we're performing well and how we're incorporating the community wealth. Matt has just reminded me that Councillor Young's committee, the Services, Climate and Community Committee, are possibly looking at some of the community wealth aspects. So I don't know if that's something, perhaps, I can see Councillor Young's in the room, that we might want to add to with your permission, to look at in terms of scrutinising, because I think Councillor Davies' point is very valid, that we need to be sure that these contracts are incorporating not just financial things, but tying in with our wider council strategies. So if that's agreeable, we'll minute that, if that's agreeable to members. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane, for your help. And if you could update us if we can do a briefing for all members, that would be great. I'm now going to move on to the second part of this, which is, as Jane has mentioned, it's Sean is presenting for us online, which is relating to our first procurement pipeline proposal. Thank you very much. Sean, are you there? I'm hoping you are.
I'm here. Hopefully you can see me and hear me okay.
We can, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the introduction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sean Cleary. I'm the Strategic Delivery Manager for Homes and Commercial Services, which sits under the wider City Services Group. Today I'm here to present a paper for the Strategic Procurement Pipeline for repairs, maintenance and compliance contracts. The paper sets out the Council's strategic procurement pipeline, covering 13 contracts with a combined value of approximately £74 million. This is across repairs, maintenance and compliance service areas. By publishing this pipeline in line with the Procurement Act 2023, which Jane was picking off earlier this evening, the Council strengthens not only transparency, but provides the opportunity to plan ahead and ensures procurement activity is aligned with its corporate priorities. The paper provides Cabinet with a clear forward view of upcoming procurements, enabling effective planning, securing value for money and sustaining high standards of service for tenants and residents. This approach also reinforces transparency and accountability, ensuring we learn from past experience while building a more resilient, customer-focused service. Bringing a pipeline together gives us visibility over the medium term and supports delivery of best value for the council. Importantly, this is not a request for additional funding. The programme consolidates existing budgets already approved within the MTFS to maintain and improve our property portfolio. The anticipated outcome is clear and consistent in the procurement pipeline, giving the City Services Group a structured approach to commissioning that secures statutory compliance, delivers value for money, and sustains high quality repairs and maintenance across the property portfolio. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Sean. That's very helpful. Obviously, I'm assuming members have read the papers. So does anyone have any questions? I think Councillor Griffin was in there first with his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sean. I'm wondering, okay, so this is in response to the Procurement Act requiring the publication of this pipeline. What I'm wondering, is this a completely new thing, or is this essentially documenting what we've been doing all along, or is some combination of things here? That's it.
So there's a combination of items here. And looking at the financial benefits of this approach for the council, having a transparent procurement pipeline enables us to plan ahead. It also allows us to drive down costs through competitive tendering and avoids expensive short-term or emergency arrangement. So it also helps us and allows us to manage budgets more effectively by aligning procurement activity with our medium-term financial strategy. The other element of it is that we know in the past that in some areas we haven't got everything that we expected through our contracts, and that experience has taught us valuable lessons about market engagement and contract management, and ultimately building in the right performance measures, so our KPIs, and the pipeline ensures we really learn from those experiences, put stronger safeguards in place, and ultimately keeps improving for the future.
Okay, thanks. Could you sort of highlight what you think are the most novel or the most important new aspects of this pipeline?
I would say first and foremost is the ability to engage en masse with the open market. So what I mean by that is that we have a stakeholders event planned for next week with circa 100 suppliers of the said solutions, where we'll be able to engage en masse and really interrogate the market to determine that what our wants are realistically deliverable and shape our specification to ultimately meet the requirements of the council, our tenants and residents, and give us really very good value for money for the solutions that are being provided.
Thank you, Sean. That was very helpful.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Gawthorpe Wood was next.
Okay, thank you, Sean. So, kind of following on Councillor Griffin's points, how's the internal engagement going on? So that's 6.2 and 6.3. I better say that I have actually had a look on the website and saw there is now a page that is about contractors and contracting, which is, well, though I didn't look at it in any depth. And then page 41, yes, I've mentioned, yes, social value versus the traditional best value. How are we reviewing this new contractor arrangement and the pipeline, and how are we reviewing the quality for tenants? So really my questions are around tenant engagement. And then this is a small point. Oh, no, there's one other thing. Yeah, the risks, so 8.1. Do you think having this contractor pipeline will ensure that the risks are lowered in terms of capacity and performance, costs as well, but really it's about capacity and performance. I do want you to look at, doing things internally as well, the repairs. I'm thinking about repairs here, really. And I did notice that, and I've got to find the section where you talk about the north and south areas in the city, and this is again, I think it's under this one of these sections, and it's about the contracts for repairs, and DCM seems to be damp condensation and mould seems to be with the south side, but you have said that the how the contracts would be let out would be in terms of the proportion of housing stock. And I know, and I appreciate, I appreciate that you've said all through this that this new contractor pipeline will cover both our housing, council housing stock, plus our commercial buildings as well, so the whole lot. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah, there's a number of questions in there, so I'll do my best to work through them. But if I go
Come
slightly
back
left field,
if I'm not making sense.
I'll,
Okay.
I'll jump in. I may call Jane in if I get stuck on some of those questions from a procurement perspective. So, first question was how are we going to engage with both internal and external stakeholders and tenants? With internal stakeholder engagement, we're still at a very early stage of the launch of the procurement exercise, but what will occur with internal stakeholders will which will run in parallel to our supplier engagement and start to pick up pace. Ultimately, we'll ensure we get that early and ongoing communication with our internal stakeholders. So that's our trade unions, housing officers, asset management, compliance team, getting them to feed into the proposals and really digging into the detail and experiences that they have to add some robustness around the specification that will be going out to the market. How we will do that? Well, it'll be regular briefings. So they'll be scheduled with our operational teams, and they'll be aware of the procurement timetable and the key milestones that we need to work towards against set time frame. Sitting nicely in there is the contractual scope, our wants, and making sure that that's fit for service and meeting the needs. It also gives us a good opportunity to look at our internal resources to ascertain have we got the right people at the right place at the right time to come out with the right delivery and outputs required, and ultimately to minimise any disruption to our services as we move forward. Looking at how we engage with our tenants, we will ensure that they have clear comms, accessible notifications in advance of any works that are occurring, again sharing the scope of the project, the timetable and any likely impacts on their individual properties around access or service access and items such of that nature. In terms of our ward councillors, again we'll provide regular updates and we'll give them routes in to engage with key officers throughout the duration of the project, so they're well sighted and well notified of where we are in the processes and aware of challenges or advantages that we have by pursuing this route. And again, on the wider community stakeholder engagement, we can look at resident associations, local facilities managers, etc., etc., etc. Looking at the split between the north and south areas, I know Jane has said that she's quite happy to talk about this, but I have got a good overview of it because today I was discussing the stakeholder engagement exercise. But Jane, feel free to jump in if I do miss anything. Yes, there is a split between north and south. It's important to recognise that there's three key contract areas within this particular approach. That's general maintenance, we've got voids, and we've got DCM. The general maintenance piece of work will be split between two contractors. Doesn't necessarily mean there'll be a straight line through the city. We will need to weigh up volume to ensure that we get good return on investment from the successful contractor. So there's a piece of work that we'll need to undertake in order to fathom that and work that through to be not only equal but provide the solutions that we're looking for, and that will be inclusive of DCM as well. The other question you asked was around risks. So I've identified in the paper the relevant risks that are in place and some of the mitigations that we can put in to minimise those. Do you want me to work through those, or are those clear in the paper?
I think they're clear, but I worry that, you know, this may help having this contractor pipeline, but we still have this problem that contractors, you know, may well fail to deliver.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about capacity, market
capacity. That will come down to effective contract management. And again, that leans into where Jane was identifying the number of officers that have undertaken the government-led recent course on effective contract management. So ensuring that the contract will have set KPIs, it will have key milestones that contractors are expected to meet, and it's ensuring that those successful contractor understands the expectations of the organisation. But ultimately, it's about that ongoing effective and assertive contract management to ensure we get the deliverables that we're expecting, and ultimately allowing our tenants to be warm, safe and dry in their own properties.
Oh, thank you. Do you want to come back on anything, Councillor Gawthorpe?
Well, there was one question, and this may be for Councillor Smith, Simon Smith, but how do the contracts, would this kind of contract pipeline or the new Procurement Act cover the contractors with something like KIP? That's the Cambridge Investment Partnership, which builds our council housing.
So, Jane, do you want to jump in on this one?
Probably easiest. In terms of the question around how do we make sure that this is all working properly? Is that what you were asking?
Well, to start with, it's really whether this is working properly. And then I had a specific question about whether this new Procurement Act and the contract pipeline would cover KIP.
So if it's specifically around the purchase of property or land, then it is outside of the Procurement Act. If it is around how we are developing the process, then it is inside the Procurement Act, and we're working quite closely with Ben on aspects of where we need to be, when and where we need to be involved. So I think we are working, the new Procurement Act does not affect KIP as far as I'm aware. If it gets to the point where we think there may be an issue, then we would look to take some external advice, legal advice.
Okay, thank you. It was really more if KIP contracts someone to do some work.
So in terms of subcontracting generally, with the new Procurement Act, we have this ability to ensure that our main contractors are treating their subcontractors in the same way as we treat them. So we're looking for back-to-back contracting so that we can ensure that subcontractors are treated equally and fairly. And we also have the right to go in and audit those processes and talk directly to the subcontractors to make sure that they are happy with the situation, that they aren't feeling that they have been unfairly treated by the main contractor.
Thank you very much. And I think that's probably another recommendation when this comes forward to Cabinet, is just to note that we need to be clear on the implications for partnerships like KIP, where we perhaps don't have direct control, but we obviously need to presumably have some kind of oversight to make sure they're complying. I think Councillor Dale was next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers for very interesting presentations and paper. I'd make one observation initially, which is there's always this challenge we have in a sort of role of governance in balancing sort of oversight with not getting too buried in the operational work. And actually, I think, you know, in some ways, this proposal is sort of seeking to address that, where I've probably, you know, seen different procurements go through for approval where I'm not sure councillors have added a great deal of value. At the same time, I think there is a tension because fundamentally we are a democratic organisation. There's always that need for not just transparency, but really demonstrating it. And I guess hopefully from this discussion, we're capturing those points going forward. On my sort of questions around this, well, I particularly, I very strongly support actually looking at the contract management more broadly and that the importance of KPIs. Procurement's just the first step. Real value is driven by managing those suppliers carefully. I guess then the question for me is how are we really then going to make sure this works going forward? So there has been discussion in previous meetings about dashboards that would be available to us, and I've not seen anything from those yet. It would be incredibly helpful as councillors if we can quite easily, draw on that information, see what's happening. I guess as a second question as well, then, are there other processes that we might put take assurance from. And I'm thinking about the internal audit team under Jonathan and actually this procurement team, where they actually provide a little bit of independent oversight. So when big contracts are being signed, we can see that independent teams are reviewing them. Because again, that's just to give us that assurance we need that everything's being run properly and well.
Thank you. I don't think there were any direct questions there. Oh, beg your pardon. Yes, go ahead.
I think the one about the dashboards I could pick up on. We are in the process, or we have got an internal dashboard that we are using at the moment in procurement. Not quite sure we're ready to face the public, because we are thinking about putting it onto our internet, not just our intranet. There is one on the intranet currently that looks at spend, and it is historical spend. We've not quite got to the point. It does take quite a while to actually unpick things and put them into an order that looks sensible, if that makes sense. If you were interested in having a look at the dashboard directly, then happily do a briefing on that and what it looks like now, and how we're developing it moving forward.
Thank you.
So can I just add into that, just to
Yes,
add on to Jane's comment. The new restructure of the City Group has introduced a delivery assurance team, which will be focused on supporting the contractual management, but more importantly, leaning into the systems that we currently operate to establish and to sweat, to ensure that any data that we're capturing from workflows can be presented in a way to members which articulates not only how the contract is operating, but will give a financial overview of the outputs. But that's a piece of work that we still need to undertake in a separate work stream. I'm in discussions with MRI, who are the owners of the said system, and we are working towards ensuring that those integrations are smooth and fluid.
Thank you, and I guess I'd just suggest this may be an item we may pick up in future agendas.
As we'll pick up on the work plan, we are going to be doing some things about the new performance management workshops, so that might come up in a moment. If no one else has any questions, I had a couple of questions actually. With my scrutiny hat on, what concerns me at the moment is page 49. We've got success criteria, but there's no metrics. So if this does go to Cabinet, that means we're signing off potentially 8 years of contracts with no metrics, with any scrutiny. I take the point that obviously we may not have the metrics yet, but I do have some concerns. For example, if we contract to do replacement toilets and building control and the Part O changes, and we can use rainwater toilets, how do we know that these contracts can be changed, amended? What criteria are we looking at? So I suppose it's two questions. What happens if they're underperforming, and how do we know as a council? Obviously, we see the KPIs coming back, but do we have break clauses? Can we, change the supplier, or are we stuck for 8 years? And also, if something changes in the next 5 to 8 years, that means we need a different kind of procurement within that contract. Do we have any flexibility without having to redo it completely or pay loads of extra money? Because I suppose I'm just a bit concerned that the success criteria here they're very vague at the moment, and actually it may be members are comfortable with delegating it entirely to officers, but I don't know, because I just wonder if, I think there's a balance between democratic scrutiny and, so for example, should we as a committee be asking for a report in 6 months or a year to see how we're doing, so that we could potentially have some scrutiny if we have underperforming contracts? But I think my question to Sean or Jane is, what do we do if the KPIs aren't met? Short of debarring someone, which I don't think is where we'd want to be going with it initially. Yeah. And what do we do if something changes during the course of the contract and we need to change what we're supplying?
So if I can pick up, if something changes in the course of the contract, we have contract terms written into our contracts that say if the legislation, for example, changes and there are differing requirements that are needed, that we will pick up on those and we will discuss that. And it will not mean that we will end the contract. It might mean that we need to negotiate some of the terms again. And there is certainly flexibility in that. With the new contracts, we're putting in lots of clauses around novating contracts because of thinking about LGR going forward and what we might need to be doing. So there is a level of flexibility. We would hope that working in partnership with our suppliers would mean that we wouldn't be getting to the point where they were failing. We would be hoping that we could support them. Part of the reason that we've gone with the north-south issue with general contractors is that we could lean into the other contractor if we're having issues with one. So hopefully that answers the questions.
I think it's more if someone is underperforming hugely, what rights do we have?
We can terminate the contract.
Yeah,
There's always a termination clause in there. I mean, it is the last resort for
Yeah,
us, to be honest, because if we terminate a contract, you have to consider how long it will take us to re-let that contract and what we need to put in place in order to make sure that we've got available resources to whatever they're failing on.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe it's just me who thinks this. Are members happy for this to go? Because this is obviously coming to Cabinet quite shortly. Do they, at the moment, I have got the note about the KIP, making sure that, and looking at customer experience, which Councillor Gawthorpe Wood mentioned. Particularly that may come up under Councillor Young's committee anyway, because obviously the housing, particularly portfolio, is slightly split between these two committees. But I personally would urge Cabinet to think about these KPIs and how they are set up. Councillor Davey, did you want to come in?
I wouldn't disagree, but I think if I got it right, Appendix 1 does outline the metrics and the criteria, so it shouldn't be problematic, I would have thought. And forgive me, Jane and Sean.
I think it's more that it just says tenant satisfaction or audit assurance. It doesn't say what
I'm saying,
percentage.
if I can finish, Katie,
Yeah,
it's about how you extend those and turn them into something practical. So I think the basics are there. If I understand our concerns correctly, it's how they can then be monitored effectively.
So, so do members think that this might be something we put on the work plan for coming back, for example, after the first year, for the sake of argument, of each contract, so we can actually review that the KPIs are being met? I mean, there's obviously the Housing Board is involved as well, but we are the decision makers. I'm happy to take views from members on this. Councillor Clough, sorry, he just beat you to it. Councillor Davey, apologies. You're next.
So am I correct in saying that you're worried about page 48, 49, where some of the criteria are very loose and there's no actual numbers
I do have some concerns that they're very loose. I mean, I obviously hope officers will be robust with the members of, the Cabinet member, but I'm also concerned as to, even if they're robust, how we make sure there is some oversight if they aren't performing, as well as the legal implications for that.
I think we just need numbers in there, really. Someone needs to look at it and put the numbers in. Yep.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey?
The answer to your question is yes, please.
Okay.
It's just an important part of our work. We have 7,500 or whatever it is homes. We need to make sure that the repairs are carried out in a way that is contractually appropriate.
Excellent. And obviously noting this is also our general fund assets as well, so it's actually even bigger than just the housing stock. So I think I've got Councillor Smith is here, but I think Councillor Bird, and I see that the leader is here as well, and I will feed back to Scrutiny about the KIP, about customer experience, and about our concerns that we need to be clear on the KPIs and how we meet them and bring them back. Oh, Councillor David, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just whittering to Tim privately. Obviously, it needs time for the contract to bed in. If it came back in 3 months, it'd be pointless. So the timing is quite important.
I mean, I don't know, a year after it, because obviously these are all going to be different contracts, so they may not all start immediately. Or perhaps we ask for an update in a year. Councillor David.
My one question on that is, in some ways, I'd like to see the system is working. What does the actual kind of KPI document look like? If it's a dashboard, is that looking sensible? Because if it's a year's time and we work out that that whole system's not working, then that's I'd probably want to look more at the actual structure of the governance in some ways than necessarily and then the details should be available for the executive councillor and anyone else. And that's where I do wonder if there might be an opportunity to see, once a system's actually been implemented, just some kind of update on that so that we've got a chance to highlight any worries.
Yeah, and I do know, obviously, we have the housing board, because a lot of these, for example, when you're looking at tenant satisfaction, I'm guessing that might be something they would, obviously they're not a decision maker, we are, but they may wish to have some sight on. So I suppose I'll feed that back, and I can see Councillor Holloway's here as well listening. So, okay, is that all right with everybody? Fantastic. I've written that down. So we're now going to move on to the work programme, if everybody's agreeable, just hopefully fairly briefly, as you know, it's there. I have a couple of updates. The update on 3C ICT will be March 2026, because that will give the new manager a year's time to see how it goes. So that's in train with Jane Wilson. As you know, we have Peter Freeman coming to our November the 4th meeting. My assumption is we probably want most of the meeting to focus on that. So we also have the local plan coming forward, which I've updated members. We hope that might come now, but obviously particularly with the North East Cambridge decision recently, that is obviously being reworked at the moment. So we don't know when it's going to be available yet, but Matt is working very closely with obviously South Cambs and ourselves so that we will scrutinise it before it comes to Cabinet. We don't have a date yet, likely to be late October, early November, I suspect. However, this does mean we would need another meeting, probably quite close to the Peter Freeman one. And I think, having discussed it with Councillor Young and Councillor Gardner-Smith, it may be that although we would own this, because it sits under our scrutiny, we may wish to invite members of the other scrutiny committee, because there's a lot of climate issues that are likely to come up in the local plan as well. I mean, Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood and I think, are happy with that in principle, to, if necessary, to sort of run it as a slightly larger committee, because the local plan sort of covers a lot of areas. I'm happy to take views on that if anyone's not happy, but it's just a heads up to say that there will be a request for an extra meeting, I think, because I personally feel the local plan is a big, something we need to be looking at. You know, it needs scrutiny. It's just unfortunate with the delays. It's not running quite to our timetable. Councillor David.
Probably wanted to prolong debate upon timetables, but Peter Freeman's work and the local plan will be so intertwined. Is there no way the two could come on the same day if you've got a 3-hour meeting?
There is. Well, we don't know yet, because we don't know when it's available. In fact, I've just been talking to Matt about this. My only slight concern is it is only a 3-hour meeting, so that would give an hour and a half for the entire of Peter Freeman and an hour and a half for the local plan. Give us plenty of time to focus. Or we could have 2 meetings. So, yeah. I think we're going to have to be bound by when it's available. Ideally, it would, I totally agree, it would be nice to run them concurrently. But I'm also concerned in terms of scrutiny, there's such huge issues that, I mean, my feeling was Peter Freeman would need 1 meeting and the local plan another. But, no, well, I bear that in mind, Councillor. I mean, I don't know if other members have a particular strong view.
Sorry, if I could say what reason. The problem is the two are so interlinked.
Indeed.
And therefore, to have whichever comes first is going to be problematic for whichever comes second, and vice versa. And the fact that we'll be referring to both at the same meeting makes me think that if there is to be an extra meeting, it should be not about these issues. Those two should go together, would be my strong recommendation.
Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood?
Right, so in November we've got the outcome of the housing review. Perhaps we could shift that, or even have that as a separate meeting. But I do think the two things, the growth company and certainly local plan, will be quite long. We'll have to be quite disciplined. But
ideally, we were hoping to obviously do it in October, so that then when we met Peter Freeman, we would have already had time to scrutinise it. And at that point, it was, as you know, hoping to go to Cabinet in October, but that unfortunately isn't the situation. So I'll bear that in mind. I don't see anyone else disagreeing with Mike or everyone. So Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood and I will do our best to do that. I say I'd be more comfortable if we didn't have the guillotine at 3.5 hours, but there we are. So, but as I say, it just depends if it's not ready for that date in November. I think Peter Freeman's diary is quite busy. I'd be loath to try and change that. Does anyone else have any questions about the work plan? Either things that we haven't got on there, things that you want to take off there? The only other one was obviously local government review, but my feeling is it's probably unlikely to be ready to be considered in February, but myself and Councillor Gawthorpe Wood are keeping a watching brief. Sorry, Councillor Davey.
Sorry, I'm muttering to myself. The proposal is going to come to full council on November the 20th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, are you sorry, forgive me, are you suggesting that what we're reviewing in scrutiny is the proposals of what is it we'd be looking at in February?
I think at the last meeting, Councillor Bajent was very keen to have it very soon, but I think myself and I think the leader agreed that because it's a full council decision, the scrutiny of what's coming forward is full council, and what we would probably be looking at is the assets, but you know, as in how things might be split. But obviously, my understanding is we're unlikely to have that by March. But obviously, it's sitting on there as a watching brief.
That's very helpful. I think I'd hate to be so hidebound by having a date in a diary that's actually not going to be, or it's going to be too early. I think that's thank you very much, Chair.
That's fine. That's partly why it's just sitting there with a sort of holding. So if everybody's happy with everything on our fourth, so broadly it's Peter Freeman, November, local plan, probably the housing, if we have it by then, and then obviously we've got the task and finish group we've talked about, which we said we would set up once that's done. And we've also got the, and my Vice Chair's reminded me, the corporate performance management, we talked about that, about when it comes to scrutiny, and Jane Wilson and her team are proposing to run workshops for that very soon, I think. I haven't had any dates yet, but we'll try and bring that forward as soon as we can for members of scrutiny, so that we can input with cabinet members. And then I think we would scrutinise the actual performance management once they're working, because we felt that would give members an input in creating them. It wouldn't be in this session, but I think we'd get more value looking at them once they're working, if members are comfortable with that. Yeah.
Did you want to say anything about Greater Cambridge Impact Fund, the heat network?
Yes, so the other thing on the agenda for the very future is the district heat network, but we don't have enough details, and it is likely that may sit with the other committee, but because it's obviously climate related. But it's, again, we're keeping a watching brief on all of this, and meeting every month with the Vice Chair and Chair of the other committee.
Greater Cambridge Impact.
Is that one a bit like it's one that you could invite, if Karen ran it, is that one that she could invite, or we could come and watch, or whatever?
I think that's exactly our plan, is rather than running loads of extra committees doing the same thing twice, we're probably, depending on the situation. With the district heat work, we're not sure yet in terms of whether there's an asset implication or whether it's climate. So it's on our radar. And as Councillor Gawthorpe would mention, there's social impact, Greater Cambridge
Impact Fund.
That's coming to Cabinet. Yeah. Oh, no, it's not coming to Cabinet. It was a devolved decision from Strategy and Resources last year, so the Chair and Vice Chair have looked over that, and in fact the Chair and Vice Chair of the other scrutiny committee, because it's not coming to these committees. And because it was already agreed at Strategy and Resources, but we've run it through both committees just to be complete, because some of S&R's resources have come here and some have gone to Councillor Young and Councillor Gardner-Smith's committee. I propose, if it's acceptable, may I just have a very short break. Oh, you're reminding me.
Just to say, this is a drawdown of 800,000.
Yes, so it's a drawdown of the 0.8 of the Social Impact Fund, which was agreed at Strategy and Resources, but it has been run past Chair, Vice Chair of both committees to make sure we're comfortable with that. So I propose to take a short break. What time are we at? It tells me it's 4:30 up there. 7:02. Can I propose we come back at 10? Does it? And it depends if people want to eat their dinner, but I'm happy to come back about 10 past in about 8 minutes, if that gives people enough time, and then we'll move to Civic Quarter. Is that people happy with that? I'm just very conscious we've got a lot to look at next. Yep. Thank you. We'll see you in 8 minutes. Could we just pause the live stream, please, Sarah? Welcome back everyone to the Performance Assets and Scrutiny Committee this evening after our short break. So item 7, as you know, is an update on the proposed Civic Quarter redevelopment, which is obviously coming to Cabinet shortly on the 25th of September. We have with us Cabinet Member, Councillor Smith. We have officers, so Ben Binns is the project sponsor and lead. We also have Jodie still with us because obviously I'm guessing quite a few of the questions may relate to finances. Again, we've got a lot of people with her. We're also joined by Councillor Richard Swift, who's at the back there as well. Welcome. So as before, I will take members' questions first and then move to ward councillors or any other councillors who may wish to ask to speak if there's time. And also if we can avoid repeating points that other people have made. So this will be taken to Cabinet and I will hopefully at the end of this summarise all of the discussion and come forward to Cabinet with some recommendations if we wish to make any. So also as a reminder, there are exempt papers or pink papers as part of this item. So those papers and the contents of them should not be shared beyond this meeting. And obviously whilst we're in open debate, so in public session, we should not be referring to information that's confidential. I hope, as you see, there are a lot of financial details in the public papers anyway. So I would hope the majority of the debate can be taken in public anyway, but we do have the consultants on, will be joining the call later, probably, hopefully for most of the closed session, because I'm imagining many of the questions will be for them. But obviously we do have a legal obligation with pink papers that we can't disclose them or share them outside, should you vote to decide to close the session. But, as I say, I'd like to have as much as possible. I'm proposing to take them broadly in the order of Corn Exchange, then Guildhall, then Market. I appreciate, like all these things, there'll be some blurring. I would probably suggest we take the TROs, the Traffic Regulation Orders, with the Market, purely because more of them affect that area. But obviously, if people have particular concerns about one relating to the Guildhall or Corn Exchange, we can do that. And we're joined by, I say, Councillor Simon Smith, who's the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Lynn Miles, Director of Economy and Places Online, Ben Binns, I've already mentioned, Tom Conlon, who's our Senior Project Manager, and we will have the representatives, William Rook from Carter Jonas, Julian Russell from Blue Horizon Ventures, and Esther Warboys from the Place Partnership. So I'm going to ask Councillor Simon Smith to do a brief just introduction before we hand over to Ben. And Ben has kindly circulated some areas which will be on the slide that he would like our views on. Not obviously we can add our views to many other things, but I hope that would be helpful as well as a bit of a pointer. Thank you. Councillor Smith, would you like to lead?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Chair. So the Council, we're custodians of 3 heritage assets and they've been neglected for a long time. And you'll see in the paper that just doing basic compliance and decarbonisation works is going to be very costly just in its own right. So what we need to do is we need to look to the scope of further investment in the buildings to secure their long-term use that's viable and environmentally sustainable. And that underpins the basis of the scheme, and we look forward to possibility of the Guildhall remaining being the centre of local democracy and civic activities to secure the future for centuries to come of 7-day-a-week market, and to project and promote the Corn Exchange, which remains the largest entertainment venue in the east of England, as a place that is used by even more people than it is now, a very popular venue. And as Chair's referred to, improvements in the public realm between the 3 assets, which I think if anybody who's been abroad from the continent recently will see that towns and city centres we see are places of much greater pedestrianisation and tree planting. We see people sitting about and enjoying just being in their own city centre. And that's a vision I'd like to have Cambridge. Because it is a global city, has a lot of visitors, and it's not really living up to its reputation at the moment, and I think it needs to. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith, and I think Councillor Smith will be staying for the session to take any questions if we have them. Ben, would you mind introducing your slides and sharing them on the screen? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee members, and we have a member of public and a market trader tonight. Thank you for your patience. So I'm delighted to bring forward proposals for the Civic Quarter. I'm just trying to get it into full slide. I think it's important to note that Office has taken a step-by-step process to ensure there's adequate transparency and governance of this project, and also ensuring the widest engagement possible. You mentioned the consultants that are on call and what their role has been, but Blue Horizons looked at the Corn Exchange, Carter Jonas looked at the Guildhall commercials, and Place Partnerships looked at the market. The other thing to say, if there is approval, there will be further engagement with stakeholders, traders, council staff and others to ensure that the process continues. These are transformative proposals. I'm not going to recap, it's already been stated by Councillor Smith, but they are significant and they are transformative. In terms of the Guildhall, we're making the biggest change here in terms of accessibility, and accessibility in two ways, making sure anyone in a wheelchair can have access to all floors, but also opening it up to the public. And you can see on the slide there, the blue areas are council offices. The light orange areas are where the public will be able to access in terms of the central atrium, the chamber and the halls, and investment is going into them, is proposed to make this a venue fit for conferences, weddings and community events. The sort of salmon colour there, which starts on the ground floor and goes up to second and third floor, is the commercial space, and that will generate income for the council. And you can see the yellow area on the ground floor is proposed to be the new customer service centre. So the basement comes to life. At the moment that's not in use, partly because it's inaccessible, and every floor will be accessible for all people, whether in a wheelchair or not. We are targeting net zero using passive house principles. That's net zero and operational carbon, and that means a reduction in running costs, which also helps the finances. One of the key principles is making sure that the Guildhall is opened up to the community, and this image tries to highlight how that might look. And we're looking at a cafe area, a seating area, and this is on the way to the customer service area, which will be completely open to the public, including a changing spaces room, access to public toilets as well. In terms of the council chamber, what the proposals look to do is to have a level floor. At the moment, as you know, the floor is tiered and can't be changed. Current proposals highlight that we can use this as a multifunctional room with a level access floor, but being able to then change it to have at least two-tiered floor, still with accessible access for wheelchairs, for a chamber that could be used for a potential unitary council and would seat very comfortably 67 to 70 councillors, with modern furniture and also modern technology, which is included in the budget costs. In terms of the heritage furniture that's here now, we're not getting rid of that. That will be preserved, but that will be put into places where officers, the public, will be able to use, and that's in the heart space or in the halls, and they will be able to be put back together for ceremonial events, should the council wish to do that. The important thing is if this chamber becomes multifunctional, it unlocks the entire Guildhall for conferencing of community events and public events. We're widening the appeal of the Corn Exchange, and that's to make it much more, again, accessible, but also to try and generate more income for the council. And you can see here the entrance of the Corn Exchange with a downstairs and an upstairs or mezzanine bar. That. In terms of the other changes we're proposing is making Parsons Court part of the public realm, which will improve, as Councillor Smith mentioned, dwell space. But perhaps more importantly, we're talking about improved accessibility with new lifts, better seats, and more wheelchair provision within the venue. Proposals also include better acoustics and ventilation. And although not quite net zero, mainly due to the heritage bricks and the fabric that's the building has as single skin brick, proposals do include a target to reduce energy use by up to 79% and using air source heat pumps and solar PV to generate energy. And these improvements in the business plan suggest a significant increase in income for the council. Now, again, as stated before, there'll be further refinement during the technical design stage, if approved, to move forward with planning, and further engagement with stakeholders will be required, as well as with members and cultural services, just to make sure we refine the design. In terms of the market square, again, we're aiming for a better customer experience. It's more accessible, safer and a cleaner surface, seating around the fountain, covered seating to facilitate the number of hot food vendors that exist there, and then after trading hours, better public safety and possible events. So proposals do include replacing the current stalls with 96 new stalls, and that's 44 fixed permanent stalls and 52 demountable stalls, with the demountable stalls expanding and contracting according to the demand of the market and traders and the public. We are retaining and refurbishing the fountain, and would like to bring it back to life using recycled water, or at least using water that can be used elsewhere, given water scarcity in the area. You will see the increased biodiversity with more trees in the market, creating more shade, but also around the market, taking feedback from officers and members and stakeholders about having trees away from the Guildhall towards the edge of the market. And there are underground bin facilities which will remove the unsightly bins that are there at the moment within the market. For planning submission, we are saying the number of stalls is fixed. The proposals for the sets are fixed in terms of what we have to submit. It's an accessible surface as well, but we do need to have further engagement with traders and stakeholders about the stalls themselves. This is the demountable and the fixed stalls, permanent stalls, and, you know, as a simple example, how do we ensure the iconic Cambridge stripes are retained with the new stalls? And also, how do the new stalls become personalised to respond to what traders need in order to trade? Further work is required on decanting. Good progress has been made with traders on this. I do need to clarify a point in the report in 2.7. The report should read at least, this will mean the council can offer a decant support package equivalent to at least reducing rents by half. And that is based on a single construction approach to the sets, which would mean the market will have to decant altogether. Now, there's been a lot of dialogue with traders, and we've just started our one-to-one process. Each trader has a contract with the council. There are over 100 traders, just over. We've got 48 traders have booked one-to-one appointments, so just under half. We've completed 25 of those one-to-ones, and at the moment there is interest for 25 permanent stalls. And we have also interest for 7 stalls where there is a request to potentially share the stall. So we're really pleased with that level of feedback and engagement, and we hope that continues. The business plan outlines the enhanced market will need more council staff. So what we're proposing is more council staff to do more cleaning, more security, and to ensure that the market is maintained in its new state, if approved, as we go forward. That does mean higher rents, and we've been very clear and transparent. The business plan in draft has been shared with traders, and our intention is to share the final draft after this committee later on this week ahead of Cabinet. So that report is in the restricted papers for tonight, but I thought it was important to note that traders have seen the draft already. For public realm, it is a significant change for the city centre of Cambridge, and just to summarise what this means, it's significantly more trees, increased in trees. The surface, apart from the road behind, in between the Corn Exchange and the Guildhall, and where the edge of the market towards towards the where Gales is, those will have a slight drop curb, but every other area we're proposing a shared surface. 10% increase in formal cycle parking, and also an increase in blue badge parking as well. We are proposing restrictions to traffic on the market, which maintains what's already in place, but extending it to Sunday. We're putting a new proposal for a TRO to restrict traffic between the Guildhall and the Corn Exchange, and a third TRO to prevent right turn outside the Grand Arcade. Now, all of those should mean greater pedestrianisation, less traffic within the area. There will still be allowance for traders to unload and load for the market, and also for Cambridge Arts Theatre and the Corn Exchange. And of course, taxis will still be able to have access, and there will also be blue badge parking, so people with accessibility needs will still be able to get through. We are aware of CamCycle's response. They have responded to the designs, and their response is they'd like to see more radical proposals in terms of a wider area around the civic quarter, and also to restrict traffic even further, including restricting taxis. So I think we need to meet with CamCycle again, and we're more than happy to do that before submitting planning and find the right balance, because there's a right balance there that we need to strike. I'll pass over to Jodie on the finances that we put up. The same numbers are in the report.
Thank you, Ben. So, yeah, just briefly to run you through the table on the screen, which is in the report. So this is essentially looking at the financial implications for the council were the project to proceed as currently proposed, based on the current best estimates, recognising that there is obviously still a lot of work to do to look at, among other things, sort of getting to the point of having an actual contract sum. So, but with the best information we have at this stage, so what this table is showing, essentially, the first column is showing the current net revenue impact on the council's budgets of each of the assets. So the Guildhall, actually, it's the Guildhall and Mandela House combined are currently costing us about £1.2 million per year in net operating costs. The Corn Exchange is generating a surplus of around about 0.7 million, and the market's generating a surplus of just under £500,000. So overall, between all of those assets, there's a very small net cost to operating those assets on the council's revenue budgets. Using the projections that the consultants have given us and looking at what's being proposed, we would look to see quite significant revenue improvement on both the Guildhall and the Corn Exchange. On the Guildhall, most of that revenue improvement is being driven by commercial income from the commercial office space in the building, but also clearly by taking Mandela out of the picture by moving all of the council staff into the Guildhall. There's a cost saving there as well in terms of operating costs at Mandela House. The Corn Exchange, the sort of the renovated Corn Exchange could potentially drive much higher income levels as well. And on the market side, there is a slight reduction in the surplus for the reasons that Ben has outlined in terms of increased staff costs and increased running costs to support that new market offering. All of that is before cost of capital, so we then look at the annual cost of financing the project. So this is broken down in more detail within the report, but essentially at the moment we are assuming a £92 million total cost. We have got £23 million already set aside in reserves for that. We are also assuming some income from potentially the sale of Mandela House. And some grant income that we have towards some elements of the market project. That would leave us requiring to borrow externally just over £60 million to finance the project. And the cost of servicing that borrowing is just over £4 million per year. That's on an annuity basis, assuming that we borrow over 50 years to match the asset life. That leaves us essentially by year 5 slightly worse off in terms of revenue, to the tune of around about just under £300,000 per year. Now, the thing to realise with a project of this nature is actually the financing costs start on day one, because as soon as you take that loan out, the obligation to repay crystallises immediately. It's like having a residential mortgage, you have to pay sort of immediately. Some of the revenue streams will take a bit longer to come on board. So the redevelopment of the Corn Exchange will drive increased revenues, but it will take some time to ramp up. Similarly with the Guildhall, there will be an initial period of marketing. There may be some voids initially. There may be some rent incentives that need to be given that mean that income just takes a little bit longer to get to the level that we're looking to. So what the projections are currently showing us is that for the first 6 years or so, post-completion, the council will be worse off in a revenue perspective. But then by year 7, we would then be better off, and the benefit would continue to grow in the future. So over the first 6 years, I think we have a negative revenue impact in the region of £12 to £13 million. But then if you look over 30 years, we are better off in real terms, so in today's money, by £7.9 million. So it does have a net positive impact on the council's revenue in the long run. Just in terms of just some caveats on that, clearly this is all about base case versus risk. So this is the base case. There are obviously inherent uncertainties and risks in any project of this scale. I think the key risks here are around those future income streams. So clearly what you have here is a situation where the financing cost is fixed. We would have to pay that regardless, but we would be dependent upon those future revenue streams from the Corn Exchange and the Guildhall. And if for any reason we didn't achieve those, then potentially that leaves us open to having to meet the financing cost without that income. So I think that's kind of the risk there.
Thank you, Jody. So taking that on board, the paper then refers to 4 options. Option 1, do nothing, but we've explained that we think, officers think with consultant input, approximately 16 million if we were to retain the buildings. We don't have to retain the buildings, they could be sold, but there is a cost for compliance and possibly more if we are to achieve net zero. Option 2, do everything, in which Jodie's outlined the cost of capital and the risks associated with that. The project is viable over 30 years, but you need to take into account the financial backdrop and some of the uncertainties perhaps with LGR and other risks associated with that. Option 1, officers did not recommend on the basis it is not do nothing, there is a cost to that. Option 3, where do some of it. Now, this assumes you can pick and mix in the sense that if you want to do some of the market, some of the Corn Exchange or some of the Guildhall, what would the impact of that be? So there's an estimate cost there. The advice from officers is that we haven't recommended that on the basis that you would need to calculate any impact on income streams related to that. So that's just the worth bearing in mind with that option. Option 4 is to proceed with technical design only, but I think it's important that if that's the option that is proceeded with, a signal is sent out to the public that the project is viable and that the council is still committed to the overall project there. What it does do, option 4, is provide a bit more financial certainty for when we come back to Cabinet in September 26 with a contract sum. So I've gone through quite quickly there, but I hope I've summarised the key points. What would be helpful for officers from the committee is understanding their feedback or recommendations or support on some of the design elements. So that's 1 to 4 about the public realm, the Corn Exchange and the Guildhall. The sustainability ambitions of the project, are they supported? Have we got the right balance between sustainability, accessibility and heritage? There are trade-offs there when we presented those trade-offs. The revenue assumptions, now we do have the consultants on board who will explain whether they are conservative or ambitious. We've used conservative assumptions, but you can ask them direct. And then, of course, have we highlighted enough due diligence on the risks? So that's the area of feedback we would find very helpful from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm taking an educated guess that we're probably going to want to deal with revenue assumptions in potentially closed session. But obviously there are quite a lot of information. The one thing I just want to check with Jodie and Ben, my understanding is, could you comment, if we get as far as planning, so we authorise at least option 2 or 4, that potentially unlocks grant funding as I understand it. I don't know if you want to both comment, just because I think that's quite an important issue in terms of going forward, is once we get past REBA stage 3, there is more of a chance of being able to bid for some, but I don't know if you want to comment on the likelihood of that.
Yeah, happy to. So, I mean, shovel-ready projects, so if you've submitted to planning, you're 6 months away for being shovel-ready. In our experience as officers, tend to attract more grant, particularly when they're trying to get grant out of the door. So I would argue that is certainly more the case once planning's been submitted.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to members' questions. Okay, any points of clarification?
We have 45 minutes. Yes. I think we probably need to get to some of the, we need to identify what are the crunch points and get to them straight away. If I'm trying to be helpful, which means we might need to go to private session immediately. My
suggestion, I have the discretion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes, which I would propose to do. And I agree, though, as Councillor Davies says, I think it is really important we do scrutinise the confidential parts, because that's what we get. So my proposal is let's take questions. Let's take questions on the first. If Ben, could you just put your last slide back up? Sorry, just so we can see it. I would propose, can we take some questions on anything on the Corn Exchange, unless they're clarification questions? Oh, Councillor Dale, is it clarification?
I was just going to seek a clarification on the finances, which I don't think come into closed session. We've mentioned, ultimately the 5-year cycle there, but then it will ultimately then lead to a contribution in the future. Does that affect the savings requirements, which are ultimately going to drive how much we're going to invest in public services? Because that's quite important. Or is it just going to hit some reserves that we already have?
Oh, Councillor David, did you want to add to that?
My question is a bit linked to that, because Jodie's talking about the council's assumptions if we won't exist in 5 years' time. And some of the, I know you can't ask Jodie for things that he doesn't know about, but for example, if we go to LGR with South Cambs, and if they agree this should be the centre, and if they think about selling Camborne, then If that all happens, there's an awful lot of extra capital that would then be available to whatever the new council is. And I think it's how, my question, I think, which is kind of linked to James, because that's then linked to what would our savings prescriptions be in 5 years' time? Because it's very difficult to predict. We have to make guesses. So I don't know how to ask the question, but how do you help us through that dilemma?
I think, yes, so we've got two questions. Councillor Dale about the 5 years and the saving targets, followed by Councillor Davey. I think what you're basically saying is if, for example, with LGR we were to use this chamber, is there any wriggle room financially that would help towards this project?
I think it's fairly obvious without, again, this is why I'm worried about saying this not in closed session, but if we were to go with South Cambs, and if they agreed, then surely we'd be looking at selling Cambourne, possibly, and then there would be an awful lot of capital released that may therefore come back into the new council building if it was agreed that the Guildhall was the place.
And we could merge with any area. So let's just say theoretically, if we merge with another area, would Jodie feel that would give us some, for example, if staff were to move here, or would that? What are your views? And obviously, Councillor Dale's question as well.
If I can start maybe with Councillor Dale's question, because that's probably the easier one to answer. In the modelling that we've done so far, we have assumed that essentially the first 6 year losses we would set aside in an earmark reserve. So we would draw that down and then obviously then over the following however many years that money would come back. So no, as we've currently modelled, this wouldn't have any impact in the short term on the council's saving targets.
And therefore we won't be cutting services in order to do this.
Correct. In answer to Councillor Davies' question, it's clearly a lot more complex, and you know, without going into kind of hypotheticals around LGR, my view on this is, you know, we've modelled this as we currently are as a council. I think it's the first step is to demonstrate that this is a viable product for Cambridge City Council as it currently is. LGR clearly does introduce a lot of uncertainty into the process, and you can get into all of those hypotheticals. In the situation you've outlined, there's potentially another asset that another council has that could be realised, but the flip side of that would be is that there are staff currently working in that building that would presumably be taking up space here, which would mean less space to rent commercially and potentially reduced income.
Or they might be in county council assets.
But yeah, so I think all we can say at the moment is that the project is viable for us. I think there has to be a working assumption at the moment that all of the people that are currently working for those individual councils all have their own office accommodation where they need it. So there is the right amount of office accommodation, and therefore, you know, if things were to change in the future, as you say, you know, potentially we have less commercial space here, but another asset to realise, or it could go the other way and we actually use less space in the Guildhall than we're currently anticipating, but that means we have more to let out commercially. So it swings and roundabouts, really.
Thank you, Jodie.
Thank you. Councillor Clough, if it's a finance one, go for it.
I think the question is, should we even be making this decision until we've had some serious conversations with South Cambs? Because, you know, we don't know whether they would even want to contemplate moving into the city centre. It feels to me that that's the first step in the journey.
I suppose my other point I was going to raise later was obviously if we don't go forward with this, there isn't a chamber that could accommodate it. And I think there is an aspiration, certainly from this council, relatively cross-party, I think that this would be a centre for governance. So I suppose, yeah, it is a difficult one with LGR, but I think also we have to be careful. We can't stop everything on the assumption of something happening a long time in the future. I think the question I would ask Jodie is, are you satisfied that this project could be resilient? Which I think picking up with what Councillor Davies said, when we change our government function. And I think you broadly said you were, but I'd be happy for you to confirm if I've misunderstood.
I think the other thing to remember is that whichever of the options may be chosen by councillors, we are not going to be in a position to enter into a contract for at least another 12 months.
Yeah.
So we're not committing the full project sum today. We're not signing the contract tomorrow. So there is still time to work some of these things out. There's still time to have those conversations with South Cambs and with the county and to make sure that it's, when this comes back to the point of being ready to sign a contract, that we're comfortable at that point. But the alternative to kind of stop it would be to just stop everything now and just put everything on hold, and then we're potentially losing time.
Thank you. I would propose to take some questions on the Corn Exchange very briefly. I'm working on the assumption probably the Corn Exchange is one we have fewest questions on, because I think from the information Ben has provided, the business case is relatively robust. It's making it net zero, it's making it accessible, and I think anyone who's used the Corn Exchange recently appreciates that we really need to deal with how we manage crowds in there and how we get people time to use the toilets and go to the bar and all those kind of things, as well as obviously making it accessible. Does anyone have any comments on the Corn Exchange that are public, as in they're not happy with the designs or anything else? Otherwise, I suggest if we're talking about finances, we'll do that in closed session. Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
Just a very minor one. I know you've put in an amount for mitigation of the possibility of asbestos being found. Do you think it's likely that you will find asbestos in the building? And will that, you know, I can't imagine this would be in any way a showstopper, but would this delay anything or change anything?
So you're talking about the Corn Exchange or just generally in all assets?
Well, actually, I'm particularly the Corn Exchange.
Yeah, so it is a risk, but one of the advantages of having a contractor on board much earlier is that they highlight these sorts of risks very, very early on, and we are undertaking early works to identify whether there is asbestos in all three assets, and so we can mitigate and de-risk much earlier on. So the answer is I don't know what's in the Corn Exchange, but we can de-risk it.
Thank you. If there's no further questions on Corn Exchange, I will move to the Guildhall. I do appreciate everybody here wants to talk about the Chamber for hours because it's where we sit for most of our life. But I am reassured, having raised this issue with officers, that the design of the Chamber is not yet firmed up, other than it will be accessible, potentially tiered should we want it to be, but also flat floored should it need to be rented out. So does anyone have any comments on the Guildhall that are not related to the financing that we'll take in closed session? Councillor Swift, we're going to take members of scrutiny first. What I'll probably do, Councillor Swift, is I'll just wait till we've gone through the open session. I'll take ward councillors at the end, if that's okay, just because, as Councillor Davey points out, we are quite limited for time. Okay, so we're good with the Guildhall, I think. Anyone? Right, other than... Oh, sorry, Councillor Clough, beg your pardon.
Just something I probably should have looked at on the plan. So is that area out there, that's not going to be changed, that's just going to stay?
I think you're referring to the shaft here.
Yes.
Yes, so that will have two functions in the future, if approved. One is it will be a light well all the way down, and also provide an accessible lift as well to the basement.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
Well, I'm not sure you can answer this now, but I mean, this is partly as well the sort of the priority. I mean, certainly in terms of improving our sustainability and modernising the council, those priorities, I think we need to do something about the Guildhall. In terms of equality and also improving access for people, and this is about, you know, people who live in my area, I would like to see the museum here. I will keep on saying this. I know that is not actually part of this paper, and there is still that possibility, isn't there?
The possibility of a
museum or area that shows our civic, the things that we own as a city, for example, that are up there and also hidden away around the building.
So there are two points to that. The first thing is the heart. You'll see in the visuals. Perhaps it wasn't particularly clear, but to the right there are some pictures, and that can be the mesas, it can be the seals, which are currently being restored. We want to showcase the history of Cambridge in the public accessible areas, and that's really, really important. There is space should the discussions with the Museum of Cambridge come to fruition, and there are discussions that are going on for a space in the basement for that, but that remains for discussion to continue and be acceptable to both parties.
Thank you, Ben. Looking at your, can you go back to the end slide? I think we are presumably broadly supportive then of the Guildhall being more accessible, having more community. And I mean, personally, I am very keen. I think the building at the moment is quite intimidating. I think a cafe, changing places, toilet, always very welcome. As Councillor Smart knows, that's something we talk about planning a lot. And, oh, could you just go to the last slide, Ben? I can't remember what the last thing was. There we go. And we're happy with the balance between sustainability, accessibility and heritage, because obviously there are heritage listed things like this, but they'll be retained within the building. Okay, that's fantastic. I'm going to move on to the Market Square now. So this is more the general principles and also the traffic regulation orders. So that's particularly around the Market Square, where in effect it's making them slightly more robust. They're obviously still allowing disabled access taxis and market traders, as they do at the moment, but also on Sundays, plus the ones at the back, so around the Corn Exchange and the back of the Guildhall. So does anyone have any comments about whether they're happy with those? So the shared accessible surface, so this idea would be that in effect there wouldn't be necessarily curbs, it would be more indicated, as we often see in some of like Trumpington and the newer developments, where it's a lot more integrated. Okay, Councillor, I apologise, I didn't see who was first, but I might take Councillor Shield if that's okay, as you haven't spoken yet. Go for it.
Oh, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Jodie. I'm really glad to see the 10% increase in cycle parking that's being considered. When I come into town, there's never ever a place to put your bike, so that's really fantastic. But I'm wondering, is 10% enough? How are we actually working out what the real need is? Is 10% okay, or should it be even more, perhaps? Thank you.
I think that's a fair comment, and what CamCycle have responded with. CamCycle also want to include informal cycle parking. That's a bit more tricky for the council. You know, do we want to promote the cycles being next to railings and so on? So we need to meet with them and just understand how we can meet their aspiration. There is talk about expanding very much the Grand Arcade to increase that capacity as well. So I think it's a fair question. We need to explore this a bit more.
Actually, that's really helpful, because in a way, I think my concern is probably across the city. It may well be that for the Market Square area, it's just right. But you mentioned the Grand Arcade. That's really fantastic, and obviously, especially in the context of we're supposed to be promoting active travel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shield. Councillor Clough, and then we have Councillor Davey.
I've just got one question. So, is the concern that's being expressed by CamCycle that people, you know, will not be able to sort of cycle into the city centre and just tie up against railings, because that's part of the flexibility of what you need. You don't want to be going down to the bottom of the Grand Arcade and then coming in here. What, you know, are you going to be able to still tie yourself up against railings or not? And I've got a second question, which is to do with access to community buses, which to come down and park up. I'm thinking particularly about the 199 bus from Newnham, which provides an invaluable service and needs to park up in just at the back out there, drops some people off, and then collects them at 1 o'clock. And I want to make sure that access for those buses is retained. I was given an undertaking when I asked this question before by Councillor Moore early on, but I presume, you know, please tell me that that's the situation. Thank you.
So in terms of the second question, this is sort of detailed for the TRO, and that's something we will need to just make sure we go back to members to make sure we haven't missed anything out, such as blue badge parking, accessibility, and so on. So that question about the bus, that's something we can come back to and make sure we've got that right. So that's the answer to that. The design doesn't restrict the bus in terms of the bus drop-off.
I mean, currently, the 199 would not be able to access. Okay, it parks up outside, just outside the Arts Theatre.
Because it's a shared surface, it will allow, under the TRO, blue badge parking or accessible, people with accessible needs to be able to have access to that area within certain time frames. Now, there's a level of detail in the TRO that we need to pinpoint in terms of accessibility or what people are allowed to do in terms of traffic. The design is not going to stop anything from, because it's a shared surface. The TRO restricts the traffic.
Well, I think I need some, can you give me the assurance that that bus will be able to continue to park there and do what it does at the moment?
Might I suggest, as this is obviously quite a detailed thing, could we leave that for Ben to follow up? Because I must admit, I don't quite understand. If it's a bus for people with disabilities, then obviously that is understandable. And I think it's probably for this scrutiny committee, I'd be very happy for you to take that forward with Ben directly, because obviously we've got plenty of time before this comes anywhere near planning. If that's okay, just for the
absolutely.
time-wise,
It's a pensioners' bus, basically.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Davey, I think you're last.
Yeah, I suppose inevitably, Ben, demandable stores. Where are we? It feels like it's almost to an extent part the nub of the discussion, because I'm sure everybody wants a better market. You've had lots of discussions and debates with traders, I hope they're amenable and discussing in a positive way, but it does feel that the nub is the demandables. So where are we with that?
So we've undertaken one trial of demountable stores. We have committed to a second trial and possibly a third trial. So we want to commit to the second trial throughout the winter months or October, November time. We want to trial 2 different brands. So we trialed one that was in the summer. We got some feedback, some of it positive, some of it negative. So we now want to trial that make with a brand that is used in Bury St Edmunds and other markets close by. We'll get further feedback, and that's traders actually using them, and so we'll get genuine feedback, and I think there'll be time for a third feedback as well. And the feedback also needs to work for the council, so putting them up and down and how that works, and traders themselves, does it work? Does it have enough shelf or paraphernalia that they need to be able to trade? So it's ongoing. We haven't finalised it, and I feel we're making good progress, but we're engaging with the traders as we go along.
I think linked to that, if things go ahead, forgive me, Katie, is there a deadline that we have to have made a decision by on relation to what the stores, or is that at the moment depending on a range of different things?
So ideally, we would like the decision on the demountables when the contract sum comes around, so next year. So that gives us time. It's not a planning requirement, but we've stated a number. But certainly we've got time to get it right.
That's really helpful, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clough, have you got a very quick one? Because I know I've got 2 ward councillors who want to speak as well, and we are needing to look at the finances very shortly.
Yes, I think it's very important that before we move forward, that we are in a situation where we're not getting these grenades being dropped on us from the market traders. We've had one today from a lady, and we've just seen a series of these over time, and it's like everything. We want to feel that the market traders are on board, because it's a very difficult thing to run a market stall, and they've got their circumstances are changing, because I imagine the amount of parking they've got access to with all the access down Adams Road and places like that in Newnham where they can't park any longer, or that's going to happen. So really, I think we shouldn't be making a decision until we've got the market traders clearly on board.
I take your point. We engage with the traders on a monthly basis. There are positive noises and disagreements that are there, and we're very clear, and we record them, we take the feedback on the chin, and we're working really closely with them. We do have a duty as a council to think wider than the traders, that's the other stakeholders in the city as well. So it's about a balancing act of what works for traders, what works for the council, and what works for Cambridge. So we're really trying to juggle all of that, as well as this sort of decanting proposals with it. So I'm encouraged that we've got 48 traders signed up to one-to-ones, and that over 20 have said they're interested in principle with a permanent stall. So that feels to me we're moving in the right direction. It's not perfect, and we do, you know, we will still have disagreements, but that's okay. We're meeting them monthly, and we'll continue to get their feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So before I propose we move to closed session, I can see we have Councillor Swift and Councillor Bick, who have both indicated they may want to speak. Obviously, this is open session, so you will be mindful of what you can say, I'm sure. Members are welcome to join us in closed session, but we will need to ask other people to leave for that point. So, Councillor Swift, I think you were first, and then Councillor Bick.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, this is about the design of the council chamber. So is this a good time to talk about that?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we will have other opportunities to review it when it comes a bit nearer to planning, but yeah, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I'm very pleased to see the new design has taken on board some of the things that we've been most concerned about. For example, retaining the tiered configuration, the horseshoe shape of the chamber, the idea that you can have 70 seats rather than the number at the moment, which is in the 40s. So I'm pleased with all of that. I'm concerned about the constant talk about the multifunctional aspect of the chamber. The reason that people want to come into this chamber is because it's a horseshoe-shaped traditional chamber, civic, political chamber shape. For example, there's the Women's Parliament coming up. For example, there's the Model United Nations. There's all sorts of reasons that people want to come into this room. There's the big hall, which can be a multifunctional place for all of the other events that don't need to have a tiered horseshoe-shaped configuration. So please don't use the argument constantly that a multifunctional space is one of the reasons for actually ripping up this chamber and making it a flat floor, for example. The other thing is that I think that I would like to echo what Councillor Gawthorpe Wood said about the Museum of Cambridge and retaining that idea that there might be some possibility of keeping the space for certainly part of the museum in Cambridge to have a permanent display in this building as part of the maces and the history of our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you happy to note those points, Ben? I mean, in terms of the chamber, I think certainly I've been on the Civic Quarter Group for a long time. I've done some site visits to other places. We went into Lambeth, I think. Was it with Councillor Smith and Councillor Bick and various other, and we did have some quite innovative use where it retained, it felt like the chamber, but then it could also be used for other events, cleared out or just rearranged, which is obviously an income generation, which is important when we're looking at this kind of money. But I mean, certainly my feeling is it would be a chamber first and foremost, with the multi-option being a bonus. But obviously members may disagree, but that was my understanding from certainly the site visits we did. It can be done in quite a way that respects the semicircular. Are you happy with that, Ben?
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that, and I note your points. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you so much. Councillor Bitt, do you have some points as well? Thank you.
Well, curiously, Chair, I'd like to really support what Councillor Swift has just said. I personally believe that there is a point in having some level of structure for a tiered chamber and a hemispherical shape. I think it is a statement of democratic values and principles, and I think it would be really sad if we lost it. But I also wanted to speak to the public realm areas of the proposals. I think that I am, as a ward councillor, have been a part of the stakeholder process in developing the proposals. I think that the area, the space around the public realm and the market square, a lot of the energy has gone into the market itself and the market stallholders' concerns, which I think is understandable. And I'm really looking for assurance that the rest of the public realm aspects of these proposals do get more probing and scrutiny than I think you're going to have time to do today. I mean, the CAM cycle communication, I think, you know, they're making some very reasonable points, I believe. And yet, I think at the end of the summer, there's another issue about public realm, which we can all have, you know, very recent memory think about. The streets are thronging to capacity over the summer period in Cambridge. There is a value in just space. And I'm just concerned that in trying to meet all of the requirements we're trying to meet here, that we pack things in such that when our streets are crowded, what seemed like useful amenities become obstacles. And so if there can be more engagement with CAM cycle, I'd be pleased, but I also would urge that you try and engage the Living Streets organisation representing pedestrians, because I think you get some useful balancing input, which are both are valuable. And I think CAM cycle are also making a good point about the way this sits. It is a very small area we're talking about as a civic quarter. It obviously sits inside the rest of the city centre and the rest of the city, and I would like to see and hear that the GCP has been involved in how this all can fit together with other things that they may be considering.
So I think the points are noted about CAM cycle and the living streets. We'll take that on board. I'll check with the consultant team if that's already been done or not. In terms of the GCP, as you know, Highways, GCP, Council, it's quite a complex relationship, but I will take that away and ask my colleague Lynn to see what more we can do, particularly on the comment about widening the area of the public realm that CAM cycle have suggested. We just need to be careful that we don't slow the process, but I think the feedback we can do before planning and make sure we've captured any further points on that. So I'll take your points on board.
Thank you very much. I'm proposing shortly, just to sum up what we've covered so far, what I will be reporting back on your behalf, I hope, to Cabinet. So we've got talking about the bus provision, which obviously Councillor Clough will liaise with officer, but just to make sure the TROs are not restricting something that's already there and that there's an alternative provision. We've got CAM cycle, living streets, and the idea of space versus things like, you know, having bicycles chained to railings, which I have to say, personally, I'm less comfortable with. I would prefer them to just have cycle parking allocated, because bicycles chained to railings can inhibit wheelchair users, for example. We have concerns about, well, not concerns, we're keen that the chamber remains in this kind of semicircular and is a primary use as a chamber, and the other uses are perhaps secondary. I think Councillor Davey mentioned demountable stalls and that consultation needs to be ongoing, though I understand that's not a planning issue because they won't be, it will just be the space is part of the planning. Councillor Gawthrope-Wood and Councillor Swift mentioned the Museum of Cambridge, so urging officers to engage with that if that's a possibility. And Councillor Bick mentioned the traffic regulation orders and the idea of the wayfinding and the space. So that, in brief, is what I will hopefully present in a slightly more articulate manner to Cabinet on your behalf. I propose, given the time we are running at, given it says it's 10 to 6 there, 15:15. We would close normally at 8:30. I'm proposing to extend for 30 minutes now, just so we know what we've got. So we would finish about 9:05, I think, because we started slightly late. So are members agreeable, A, to an extension? I'm seeing assent, thank you very much. I am now proposing that we close the session to exempt session, we move into exempt session so that we can look at the more detailed things. And obviously, we have mentioned emails from market traders, if there are things in there that people want to bring up, because the market traders have seen the business case, remember, but it's not public more widely. So in this case, I have to ask, or I have to propose that the public be excluded from this meeting for the following items of business. So those are the ones listed on the front of the agenda, because they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as described in paragraph 3, section 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, which I'm sure you've all read. Vice Chair, would you be willing to second my proposal?
I'll second that.
Oh,
Yes,
you
I
would.
sec-
Thank
I
you very
second
much.
that.
Just to note, if we move to closed session, members, whether that's ward councillors, scrutiny chairs, are welcome to stay, but we do need to exclude the press and the public and anyone else other than the officers involved. And obviously, if you do remain in closed session, you are bound by the law, obviously, that things we are discussing cannot be passed on outside this session. If you're not comfortable with that, that's fine, you can not do it. But in my view, it's very important we have this discussion and we get the full details from the consultants. And if we didn't do that, I think we would be in dereliction of our duties as Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Clough.
I really wanted to raise a point which I've emailed you about already, which is, and when I read some of the pink papers, I felt there was quite a lot of those content which didn't feel to me as if it was particularly confidential. And particularly the first report there contains some, really useful information. And I looked at, well, actually, that's just public information. So I feel that there's an issue here that we should be, there's an issue of public transparency in terms of supplying that information to, or whatever of those can be supplied, even in a redacted form, to the public. I think it's really important. So I'm not proposing to vote against the going to close, but I'm just going to abstain because I just don't think we've really, I think we've got a problem here with those pink papers.
I think, as I hope you appreciate, as Chair and Vice Chair, we have been through this in detail with officers. I personally pushed very hard to make sure a huge amount of the numbers are here. We're not hiding any of the costs. And I am personally satisfied. I did check with members about 3 weeks ago to let you know we were going to be proposing closed session, and nobody raised any objections at the time. If I'd had objections earlier, obviously I could have gone back to officers, but unfortunately members only raised it yesterday and today, which unfortunately put me in a quite difficult position. Having said that, I would like to ask Ben, are you satisfied that these pink papers meet the requirements of the Local Government Act, and that any information that is in there that is also in the white papers where appropriate, where it has been able to extract it? If that's helpful, Councillor Clough.
It's that difficult balance. Again, you heard in the previous reports about procurement and the new regulations that have come in. We have a duty as a council to ensure best value. And so it is possible to try and redact parts of the report, but there's a lot of inference in there that could give a competitive advantage to a tenant who wants to sit in the Guildhall or to a contractor for a contract price. So we have taken the cautious approach to ensure best value for the council. Only 2 of the 3 reports will essentially be private because, as I say, the market traders will see the market report business case. So it is a difficult balance, but it is not unusual. Councils up and down the country would normally keep private the cost plan and any business case.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my concern when I made the decision was obviously we have to balance the public interest, but we also need as a scrutiny committee to get the information from consultants. But anyway, I think Councillor Shield, did you have a question particularly on the exempt session, or is it?
This is for the open session. It's not confidential. It's a small point, if that's okay. It's just to ask whether any member has an objection to adding one more point to the list, Chair, that you'll be taking to Cabinet of considerations. Does any member object if we add to that list the importance of improved ventilation in the chamber, both from a comfort standpoint and also from a health standpoint.
I would be very supportive of that, spending 8 hours in planning committee. I'm sure Councillor Smart does as well. We do need some better ventilation in here. It gets boiling. So are you happy to take that? I'm happy to mention that back to Cabinet if members are agreeable. Councillor, you're not dissenting. No.
Well, I was just going to note, I do share some of Councillor Clough's concerns, and I think one of the issues we've had here is we've not had much time to review the pink papers. Now, there are reasons for that, but then it does make it quite hard for us to then come back with a challenge on what should be made public. And actually, as a fix, I think we need to go into that session, but at this time. But I think actually before it goes to Cabinet, there may be an opportunity to bring out more there, which I guess would leave to the chair to take forward. But I
suggest we probably raise that in closed session, because obviously if people want to raise that, we need to raise it in closed session because they're pink papers. So I'm happy to take that forward but I am mindful that we really need to be looking at the financials. So could I please ask that members of the public or journalists, thank you so much for coming, leave the room. Just apologies, we have Councillor Rosie Moore online. I apologise I didn't introduce you earlier, who's the Cabinet member who has responsibility for the market project, as well as Councillor Smith. We're just going to stop the live stream. Can I just check everyone is happy to go into exempt session? Can I take I think Councillor Clough wanted to vote on that. So, okay, so Councillor Clough, can I take it that everybody else is supportive of? Yeah, I'm saying, Councillor Clough, can I just remind you, if you do then join us for closed session, you are obviously still bound by the legal responsibilities of what you see not being able to be made public. Is that okay?
Of course, I've got a whole load of questions.
Thank you so much. Okay, one moment, Matt would just like a word. Oh, do you want? I do beg your pardon. Just before we close the link, Sarah, is we still live? We are. I do apologise. Ben did ask me so. We have the consultants on the call for detail, but I would like to ask the three consultants just to confirm in public session that they support and stand by the confidential papers that we have, that they're still happy with the information in there, they're happy that in public session that this is reasonable, they've undertaken due diligence and they're still valid. So I'd be grateful if, I don't know, Ben, if you want to lead on, who wants to talk on that?
Sorry, Chair. So if I can get William from Carter Jonas just to confirm that first, please.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I confirm that we stand by the papers that were produced. Thank you.
Thank you, William. And then Julian from Blue Horizon, please.
Good evening, everybody. Absolutely echo Will's feedback. We stand by the contents of the report and our contributions.
Thank you, Julian. And then Esther Warboys from Place Partnerships.
Sorry, I confirm that I stand by the market business plan as produced and circulated.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that does sound a bit strange to ask, but I think it's important for the public to hear that, you know, the consultants are happy to justify what they're doing. Okay, I'm proposing to move into exempt session now, so could we please terminate the live stream, and thank you very much to anyone who's been watching.